Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. For those of you in other parts of the world, good morning or good evening. A very warm welcome to this first session of our annual Land Degradation Neutrality webinar series. My name is Noel Utley. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few quick housekeeping points with you. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded. Secondly, translation into Spanish, French, and English is provided, so please choose your channel. You can click on the world icon to select your preference. You're warmly encouraged to use the chat box to introduce yourself, to share your reflections, and to exchange with other participants. We have a Q&A function where you can post your questions to the panelists. Please make clear which panelists you are addressing the question to. We will dedicate some time for interaction and question and answers with the panelists after their presentations. We kindly ask you to be concise with your questions so that as many voices as possible can be heard. And you'll see on the slide how to go about accessing the Q&A. This series is taking place within the framework of the project Strengthening Civil Society Role in Achieving Land Degradation Neutrality, which is supported by the Global Environmental Facility, and it's implemented by Drynet, the IUCN, and both ends. This annual webinar series aims to enhance the knowledge and capacities of civil society organizations on key topics related to land degradation neutrality. Remember that participants who fully attend at least 3 of the 4 webinars will receive a certificate of participation. Over the next 60 minutes, we'll explore the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, drawing on the experiences and insights of our distinguished guests. The objectives of today's webinar are firstly to introduce CSOs to the UNCCD, its mandate and its key mechanisms. Secondly, to highlight the role that CSOs play in the UNCCD processes, both at the national level and also at the international level. Thirdly, to set the stage for the broader annual webinar series, which will also be focusing on the VGGTs and monitoring and land degradation itself, land degradation neutrality itself. And finally, our last objective is to ensure some space for interaction and clarifying questions. Now I'd like to briefly introduce our first panelists. I'll be giving the floor to Marcos Montoiro for today's first presentation with a high-level overview of what is the UNCCD. Marcos Montoiro is the External Relations Officer at the UNCCD. He's been working with the Secretariat for over 25 years in different areas, ranging from civil society engagement to public information, knowledge management, and the implementation of the convention in Latin America and the Caribbean. Marcos is a lawyer from Spain who also holds a master's degree in social and cultural anthropology. Marcos, you have the floor for 10 minutes or less. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Noel. And thank you so much also to the organizers and those of you that you are participating in this first webinar. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to open this series organized in the framework of this specific project, the first one that has been done to create the capacity of the civil society within one of the multilateral environmental agreements. Looking at the participants, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I see that there are some new people and perhaps others that they have been following this convention. So my presentation, I will focus a little bit on what is the UNCCD and the problematic that we are here talking. And I'm sure perhaps some of you know already, but then we will enter into more details. So as you may know, the UNCCD is the Convention to Combat Desertification. It came out of Rio together with our sister conventions of climate change and biodiversity. You may know them perhaps better than the UNCCD, but I hope that this will change, if not already, the perception that we have. This convention is focusing mainly on the land. It's focusing on the aspects that ensure that we are having the food that we want for our livelihoods, and the clothes that we are wearing, and we are ensuring livelihood for everybody. The convention, I said that it was born in 1992, but it was only the mandate for his establishment. As you may know, when we arrived to Rio, there was the opportunity already to have the convention on climate change and biodiversity. They were signed there because they were priority for developed countries. But the developing countries, and mainly those in Africa, they said, listen, what is going on here? We have a very serious problem, which is the problem of land degradation and drought. So we would like also to have a similar convention that will tackle both environmental and sustainable development issues. And that's why the negotiation started. It was finished by 1994, and in 1996 entered into force. So next year will be our 30th anniversary that this convention entered into force. Right now, there are 197 parties to the convention, similar numbers that our biggest sisters, climate change and biodiversity, they have. But the structure is very similar. So we have a secretariat where I am working. I'm responsible for external relations, also in charge of the engagement with the non-state actors. And also, we are servicing the parties, which they meet every 2 years in what we call the Conference of the Parties, or the COP. There are also two subsidiary bodies that have been established. One that will look at the review of the implementation of the convention, and it's called the CRIC. The CRIC will take place this year in Panama in more or less 1 month, from the 1st to the 5th of December, and it will be the 23rd session. But also we have another subsidiary body that looks at the science and technology aspects. And this session, this CST is meeting at the same time as the Conference of the Parties itself. So we have the governing body, we have the subsidiary bodies that are providing support in the review of the implementation and also on the science and technology. We have another instrument which was created, is the Science Policy Interface. Perhaps you have heard talking about the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that is providing scientific information also for the climate change process. And similar, it happens with the IPBES, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which also provides some support on that area, particularly the scientific area, to CBD. In our case, the parties, they say no, there is no need for that. You can tap and look at what the IPCC and SPI and IPBES are doing, and perhaps gather some data from them. However, our parties agreed to have a different body that we call the Science Policy Interface, in which we have representatives of the countries, but also representatives of the civil society organizations and intergovernmental organizations. So this body is working, they receive some mandate from the COP and prepares reports, studies that afterwards are feeding the discussions that the parties are having in terms of policy, in terms of science, etc. In addition to that, when this convention was established, if we were not given the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, the one that is also financing this program, because they understood, or they thought that this convention is not entirely an environmental convention, and the projects that can be undertaken to protect the land, they cannot generate global benefits. So that's why they say that is not, the GEF could not provide funds for implementing the convention. Instead, they created what we call the global mechanism, which at the beginning was a kind of a broker that was looking at where were the needs, where were the resources, and tried to match them. After 10 years, parties realized that this is not a proper way to work. They were thinking that there was some type of discrimination because the funds that they were able to secure through the global mechanism, they were not as important as those of the GEF. So that's why 10 years later, finally, and with the support of many of the civil society and others, it was agreed that the GEF will be one of the financial mechanisms of the UNCCD. And as you know now, there is a specific window for land degradation where parties and also civil society, they can apply to get those funds for the implementation. So this convention has been evolving quite a lot. If you see in the last few years since the inception, it was understood at the beginning as a convention focusing mainly in Africa. If you look at the full name of the convention, it is stated there that this is the convention to combat desertification and mitigate the effects of drought, particularly in Africa. From there, it turned into a global convention where we have these more than 190 parties. And then we have this concept that was established and that has been governing in the last years since the SDGs, the way the parties are working and are addressing the problem of desertification, land degradation, and drought is the land degradation neutrality. You are going to see during this series of webinars something very important and in which way you could contribute to the work that we are doing. And that was accepted within the convention, but also distilled into the Sustainable Development Goals under SDG 15 and 15.3. What is land degradation neutrality? There is a specific definition. It's the state whereby the amount and quality of land resources necessary to support ecosystem functions and services to enhance food security remain stable or increase within specified temporal and spatial scales and ecosystems. So this is what we are looking and we'll be looking at. The parties themselves, they have to report against a set of indicators to see if we can achieve this land degradation neutral world by 2030. And this is all linked to many aspects related to food security. And you will see also that, how we can make sure that the land doesn't get degraded so we can continue getting the food provided. It's also linked to aspects related to forced migration. If the land is degraded, if the resources are not available, what are we doing? In which way we can avoid that people need to go from rural areas to urban areas? It's also linked to the land governance and the access to land, the land rights of the people, and particularly those that are in situation of vulnerability, women, indigenous peoples, youth. So this is just to tell you, and I will stop here, how important our convention is. If we talk about synergies also with other multilateral environmental agreements or environmental and development challenges, land is at the centerpiece. And if land gets degraded, then we are having a lot of challenges to continue our survival. Thank you so much, and my presentation ends here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcos. Fascinating as ever. Much appreciated. And now I'm going to give the floor to our second panelist, Marioldi Sanchez, who will share with us how our CSOs engage in the UNCCD process. Marioldi is leader in forest conservation and sustainable development project manager at IDER, a non-governmental organization in Peru. She's currently the LAC region representative on the UNCCD CSO panel, a position that she also held from 2016 to 17. She was the civil society observer on the UNCCD Science Policy Interface, 2018 and 19. She's a forestry engineer with a master's degree in social management and studies on international relations, forest certification, and development project monitoring. and evaluation. Marioldi, you have the floor for 10 minutes or less, please. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Noel. Hello, everyone. I am very happy to participate today in this webinar and to have the opportunity of sharing about the role of civil society in the UNCCD, in this convention. I would like to start by stressing that the role of civil society organizations, CSOs, is crucial for achieving the objectives of this convention, as they can help to gain a broader understanding on how to make a positive impact on land and people. The next slide, please. Since its creation, this convention recognizes this role, and in its text is stated that parties should develop cooperation among all levels of government, communities, non-governmental organizations, and landholders. Also, the convention text calls for parties to encourage non-governmental organizations to support national action and to make full use of their expertise. According to the convention governance, civil society organizations, CSOs, can participate as observers to the UNCCD. CSOs can apply for an observer's status accreditation, and once accredited, they can participate in official sessions. To date, there are around more than 1,200 CSOs accredited with observer status. The next slide, please. Now, I will talk a little bit about the civil society representation in the UNCCD, how we are represented in this convention. The Conference of the Parties of the UNCCD created the CSO panel to facilitate coordination and collaboration among all the accredited CSOs. The CSO panel represents the 5 UNCCD regions. One representative per region is democratically elected by accredited CSOs every 2 years, which means that the panel has a 2 years mandate. And the panel coordinates our civil society advocacy and the delivery of recommendations in UNCCD official meetings and processes, and also reports on its work to the COP every 2 years. And the next slide, please. Also, civil society is represented in the CSO panel, but also in other initiatives of the convention. This is the case of the Science Policy Interface, the SPI. It's an initiative of the convention, an official initiative, which has the mandate of transforming the latest scientific findings into evidence-based proposals that supports action on sustainable land and drought resilience. The SPI governance considers the participation of observers from different bodies, including civil society, who can contribute to its work. We currently have a CSO observer to the SPI, the observer is also elected by all accredited CSOs for a 2-year mandate. Our current observer is Manon Alvegnac from CARI, France. The next slide, please. Thank you. And also, civil society could be represented in intergovernmental working groups that are established by the COP with specific mandates. Usually, these working groups are composed by parties' representatives, independent experts, and observers from different bodies, including CSOs. Last year, COP16 established an intergovernmental working group on the future strategic framework of the convention, with a mandate of identifying key elements for post-2030. And we currently have one observer from CSOs in this group, Emmanuel Sek from ENDA, Senegal, and also as alternate observer, Rachel McMongel from Landesa. They are our representatives in this relevant working group. The next one, please. And now I would like to talk a little bit about the caucus. These are other initiatives that could engage and are engaging actually civil society to support the convention. The Youth Caucus, which brings youth perspectives to the convention and coordinates youth engagement. The Gender Caucus is a multi-stakeholder platform to support addressing gender equality in the convention, and the Indigenous Caucus that resulted from the collaboration between the UNCCD Secretariat and the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. It was recognized by parties last year in COP16. Also, a caucus for local communities is in process of establishment. The next slide, please. Now I will talk about how CSOs can effectively participate in these convention processes and building on what I just mentioned, our representations, our representatives on the CSO panel, the caucus. I would say one way is that CSOs can get accredited as observers, so they can have representatives attending official meetings and contribute to advocacy and other strategic actions. That would be like the first step or the first way of engaging. Also, CSOs can participate by engaging with our CSOs representatives in the UNCCD. You can connect with your regional representatives at the CSO panel, follow up communications from the panel, and join the activities they organize. Also, CSOs can connect with observers to the SPI and the intergovernmental working groups to share experiences and information from their work, from local realities, information that you think could contribute to the objectives of these groups. Also, you may consider to join and engage with one or more of the UNCCD caucus I just mentioned. For example, subscribe to their newsletters, participate in webinars and other activities organized by them. And also, of course, to participate in other UNCCD initiatives that are regularly shared by the Secretariat through social media and via email. Finally, during official UNCCD meetings, CRICs and COPs, Marcos just mentioned that we have a CRIC in December in Panama. So CSOs can participate in activities coordinated through the CSO panel and the different UNCCD caucus for collaborative advocacy and influencing the convention decisions. For example, you can join working groups for drafting CSO statements to be delivered in official sessions or support the organization of events. The next slide, please. Why the CSO engagement in the UNCCD matters? It matters mainly for two reasons. The first one, because we CSOs can provide information and knowledge required to take action. From study cases to demonstrative examples, CSOs have shared valuable information for UNCCD guidance documents and tools, such as SPI reports, the Global Sustainable Land Management Database of WOCAT, for example, the Global Land Outlook. These documents are consulted by countries and stakeholders, including CSOs, for guidance and examples of solutions. And a second relevant aspect is the advocacy capacity of civil society organizations for amplifying communities' voices and bridging local realities with COP decisions. At each COP, CSOs contributes to decisions, reports, initiatives. COP decisions request action to parties, including take into consideration our recommendations, and these COP decisions could translate into national initiatives. My colleague Anna will talk about this in the next presentation. And also, COP decisions could lead to the strengthening of the participation of civil society in this convention. The creation of the CSO panel, the inclusion of open dialogue sessions on the official COP agenda, the creation of initiatives to address issues such as gender and land governance are results of this CSO advocacy. For finalizing my presentation, I will share a representative example on how CSO's advocacy can deliver relevant results. In this case, it's an example related to land tenure. Land tenure advocacy started from CSOs when land degradation neutrality was under negotiations by parties. with a collaborative and diversified strategy, which included statements highlighting the importance of land rights and land tenure for achieving LDN, organization of different kind of events, side events, the open dialogue sessions addressing this issue, inputs to SPI reports, and bilateral advocacy with delegates. On 2017, the CSO panel launched a dedicated publication on land rights that offered policy recommendations to parties, and on this same year, COP13 approved 4 decisions that mentioned the importance of land tenure. The following 2 years, this collaborative advocacy continued with an active work of the CSO panel and CSOs networks, including Drynet network. And on 2019, the COP14 approved the landmark standalone decision on land tenure, Decision 26, which is a really important milestone for the international community. The UNCCD is the only multilateral environmental agreement with a decision on land tenure. And from this decision, parties were encouraged to recognize the tenure rights, customary rights, the equal use of ownership rights of land for women. And this decision also made possible the establishment of the current UNCCD FAO joint initiative on land tenure. And under this initiative, several guidelines have been produced, highlighting the technical guide to integrate the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure of land, the VGGTs, into land degradation neutrality. This topic will be also presented in the next webinar of this series. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to share, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marioldi. We'll get to questions and answers at the end, but I would now like to hand the floor to Ana Di Pangracio. She's an environmental lawyer specializing in biodiversity and has also studied gender and law, environmental management and policy, and project monitoring and evaluation. She's the Biodiversity Director and Deputy Director of Fundación Ambiente y Recursos Naturales, known as FARN, which is an Argentinian NGO where she manages various projects on biodiversity conservation, sustainable use, and restoration with a human rights-based approach. She has followed the CBD and the UNCCD negotiations since 2010 and 2017, respectively, and was the LAC region representative on the UNCCD CSO panel between 2022 and 2024. She's also an elected IUCN councillor. Anna, you have the floor for 10 minutes or less. Over to you.
Thank you, Noel. And greetings from Buenos Aires, Argentina, colleagues. My focus will be on how global processes and decisions on land degradation, desertification, and drought translate into relevant national processes in which CSOs can engage. If you could share, please share the slide. Yeah, exactly that. You know that globally about 2 billion hectares of land are degraded, affecting nearly 3.2 billion people. That equals to more than 40% of the world's population. And these processes disproportionately impact marginalized and rural communities whose livelihoods depend directly on healthy soils and ecosystems. And the UNCCD provides a global governance framework where local struggles related to land can gain visibility and influence. For CSOs, this means both amplifying grassroots voices and holding governments accountable to their commitments, in particular in this case, the ones that they assumed in this fora. Next slide. No, the one before, sorry. Why UNCCD matters for CSOs and communities. Okay, then the one on national focal points, sorry. National focal points are the primary contact point for anything related to the UNCCD in your country. they coordinate national implementation of the convention. They are often located in environment or related agencies. Building a constructive relationship with the national focal points is strategic. The national focal point is definitely an actor to approach. Their information can be found on the UNCCD website, so you can find the one of your country. Get to know your national focal point and advocate, provide input, share community data and experiences with them. The next slide on regional groups. Regional groups are not formal bodies within the convention, but rather political coalitions within the UN system. They ensure that countries from the same region present a coordinated voice in negotiations, which increases their leverage. For CSOs, regional dynamics are also important. They open opportunities to scale up advocacy from the national to regional level. Regional CSO networks often mirror these groupings, try to engage with them to strategize. Regional CSOs networks can also prepare joint statements or campaigns to resonate more strongly in the process. There is a lot of information about existing regional CSOs and other more informal groups, networks related to land. You can find the information and contact them. It is important for CSOs to engage with countries' regional groups as well. They tend to offer meetings with CSOs, but if not, please request it through your regional representative in the CSO panel on the occasion of the UNCCD meeting. And that's also an opportunity to stress that participation and a dialogue with these regional groups should not only take place on the occasion of UNCCD meetings like the COP or the CRIP, but that is also welcome before and after the negotiations in order for CSOs to share their views, to influence on decision-making from parties before, as they are preparing their positions towards the meeting, and then also an instance for debriefing and see how parties reflect on the most recent formal meeting. You can, of course, also engage with delegations individually, not only approach the one from your country, but also many other national delegations that attend UNCCD meetings. The next slide on national processes around the world. There are key national processes for you to consider to engage. I will then refer to each of them specifically, but just to highlight in here that for CSOs, these national level processes represent important entry points for influencing the design of national strategies, ensuring commitments translate into real action and not just in paper, and bringing local knowledge into decision making from government officials. So if we go to the next slide on national action programs or plans, every country party to the UNCCD is expected to develop a national action plan or NAP, which identifies priority measures against land degradation, desertification, and drought in their own country. These NAPs are core UNCCD instruments at country level. Each country designs its own strategy adapted to local context, but always inspired by what's decided by consensus at the international level on the occasion of the convention meeting. They should align also with other processes that you might be involved, like the national determined contributions under the Climate Convention or the National Biodiversity Strategy under the CBD. So what we as CSOs can do is to influence both the design and implementation, in this case of the NAPs, within the Desertification Convention, by ensuring inclusion of community concerns, but also consistency with other related processes. This process needs to be in dialogue. The next slide on the land degradation neutrality targets, there will be a specific webinar on this issue. It will be the second one from this series, but just to highlight today here that land degradation neutrality is the flagship concept linking the UNCCD to the 2030 agenda of the UN that you might also be following. Since 2015, many countries have set land degradation neutrality targets under the UNCCD, aiming to ensure that by 2030, any land degraded is balanced by an equivalent area restored. And it gives country a quantifiable target, no net loss of healthy land. CSOs here can play a critical role in ground truth in national data, since official statistics often miss local realities. They can also highlight human rights aspects related to LDN, for instance, ensuring that restoration does not displace communities. And you can advocate even for more, to be more ambitious and to move from net loss towards no loss, and through effective land conservation and sustainable management. And the next slide on national drought plans. As you might be aware, drought is a growing global threat. By 2050, droughts may affect 3/4 of the world's population, according to the latest report. No country already in the world is free from drought. More recently, UNCCD initiatives encourage countries to develop national drought plans, integrating early warning systems and risk-based management. And CSOs can definitely mobilize community monitoring networks, incorporate traditional knowledge, and push governments to allocate resources to go from prevention to go from emergency aid to prevention. It is key when it comes to drought to focus on the element of prevention rather than always running after the effects of drought. So CSOs can definitely play an important role in that respect. And the next slide on national reporting processes, what and why is important for CSOs to engage in this instances as well. You might be aware that there is also a reporting process in the UNCCD that is essential for accountability from parties. It helps measure how countries are actually implementing UNCCD obligations and how well they are advancing towards land degradation neutrality. Using a predetermined system, which is known as the PRICE, it standardizes data across countries, helping comparisons and aggregate global assessments. It also includes reporting on an SDG indicator, that is the 15.3.1, which ensures also consistency with global sustainable development goals. Reporting also opens up space for CSOs to know what's expected, to track progress, and to contribute local data and stories. The next slide on the reporting cycle, just for you to be aware that there is a 4-year cycle that gives enough time for policy implementation and seeing measurable changes, but also ensures that reports aren't too stale. Knowing the timeline also helps CSOs to plan our engagement. Next slide, please. Following on the reporting instances, the dual nature of reporting, both quantitative and qualitative, means that CSOs can contribute beyond just numbers. We can write case studies, we can raise issues from the ground, we can provide feedback on policy implementation. Parties must submit reports, then the UNCCD Secretariat reviews, and there might be feedback. CSOs can help keep the process transparent and push for strong, meaningful reporting rather than just being a process of box checking. No? So CSOs can highlight where performance is lagging, press for better enabling environments, and transparency in resource mobilization. Usually parties do open a space for participation in reporting, but of course you have all the rights at the national level to request such instances in your country. The next slide, opportunities for CSOs. The national processes that I mentioned before, they often include consultation instances, but levels of engagement may vary. As I said before, in the reporting process, there might be countries opening space for contributions from civil society or feedback on an advanced draft of the report, but that might not be the case in every single country. So it is important for you to know what are these national instances, to get accredited and contribute to the discussion within the designed, whether commissions, advisory groups, strategy, however your country names it. In my country, we have an observatory on land degradation, desertification, and drought, and you can get accredited as a CSO in order to contribute. So that is the possibility at the country level to influence decision making and input in drafting and updating the NAPs, the LDN targets, the drought plans, and the periodic reports that I've been mentioning. The more CSOs we are, the stronger our voice is. So you can bring your work on different thematic issues, sustainable land management, agroecology, soil conservation, restoration, the need for full respect for human rights, including free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous peoples, the element of gender equality, traditional knowledge, and land rights, among many others. CSOs have a very diverse expertise, and that is very much needed in these national instances. And at the same time, of course, you can build alliances with different groups, especially those most affected by land degradation, desertification, and drought, to strengthen legitimacy and ground advocacy in real need. And just in closing, the final slide with some key messages. We need to be aware that the UNCCD is not only about governments. Of course, it is a party-driven process, but it also offers spaces for civil society to act. The more you get involved, the more the process gives you, but it requires time and patience. These are multilateral spaces, so that it requires patience. You can also lean on networks if you do not have the time or funds to make it to negotiations. Follow as much as possible the discussions online, and you can lean on colleague organizations, on groups, to stay informed and identify priorities for your advocacy and action, particularly at the national processes, which tend to be more at hand. Maybe you don't have the time to follow discussions at the international level, but all formal documents and decisions are then uploaded online, and you can focus your strategy at the national level and go with your government officials. So national processes are really where change happens, following the mandates coming from the global instances. So CSOs can definitely shape national debates, contribute knowledge, and partner with right holders and stakeholders for stronger impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. The question and answer has been very, very busy. And thanks very much to Marcos and also Marioldi for contributing answers to the questions raised by participants. Many of you have some very good questions about how to engage more closely. So I'd like to thank all three panelists for their wonderful insights, for managing to provide us with relevant information in a very concise way. It's a big subject. It's a complicated convention, but we really appreciate what our panelists have done for us today. We have now about 10 minutes for further questions, and we're first going to address a few of those that have been shared already in the chat box or in the Q&A. And if you would like to raise your hand to ask a question, please be as concise as possible. I'd like to note that many of you had asked questions about accreditation, and Marcos has provided excellent information also about how to engage with the Youth Caucus and the Gender Caucus. I think that's extremely helpful information. And thanks also for the website links, Marcos. Would any of our panelists like to answer any of the questions raised? There was a question raised in the chat from Josu Aruna about why there's less financial support for this convention than for the other conventions. And I think the answer is simply that in the beginning, desertification was seen as a local problem, whereas climate change and biodiversity loss are more easily understood as global problems. But I think that perception has now shifted, and more the people of the world and the governments of the world are realizing that these are problems that don't recognize borders, and that they have a very complex interplay with climate and also with biodiversity. So we're moving in the right direction, but it's a constant struggle for scarce resources.
Noel, maybe I can take a couple of questions that I've seen in the Q&A section that were directed. Y para responder más rápido, quizás cambio a mi idioma nativo, el español. Una pregunta era más cómo hacemos para motivar a las organizaciones a trabajar juntos a nivel de país, y bueno, en mi caso que soy de Argentina, y por el otro lado, y quizás ahí Marcos puede acotar adicionalmente de cómo ayudar a las ONGs con financiamiento en este sentido, ¿no? Para hacerse parte de los encuentros. Ciertamente hay un grupo de todas las organizaciones que están acreditadas en la región de Latinoamérica y el Caribe. Hay quienes están acreditados, nuestro representante en el panel de las OSC, que fue elegida, en este caso actualmente es Marioldi. Hay comunicación vía email y también hay un grupo de WhatsApp al que uno se puede sumar. Y después eso se traduce también en contactos a nivel nacional, entre las que estamos acreditadas ante la convención, que es bastante sencillo de poder acreditarse, en tanto se sea una ONG legalmente acreditada. Tenemos reuniones, sobre todo lo que más motiva es cuando se acercan las reuniones de la convención, ¿sí? Camino a esas reuniones tenemos instancias donde podemos dialogar con otras ONGs, colegas, para ver cuáles son los temas de agenda y si hay algo en particular que priorizar, y si alguna no puede estar por diferentes razones en la reunión, poder capturar sus prioridades y llevar sus voces también. Y también muchas veces pasa que nuestro mundo no es muy grande, entonces las ONGs que estamos muchas veces acreditadas ante convenciones también coincidimos en otros espacios de otras redes. Entonces el diálogo sobre los temas importantes para esta convención también se dan en otros espacios ambientales, ¿no? donde estamos. Así que ciertamente si es un grupo bien activo de ONGs, ese diálogo y esa estrategia se da naturalmente, pero sobre todo se activa cuando estamos en un año de COP o en un año donde hay alguna reunión relevante, ¿no? Y después, sí, la cuestión del financiamiento, sabemos que la convención hace llamados abiertos cuando hay disponibilidad de fondos para poder hacerse parte de las reuniones, y hay todo un proceso para poder ser seleccionado, y hay que destacar que en este caso la convención es bastante única, ¿no? En ese sentido, porque para ir a reuniones de otras convenciones desde el secretariado no se ofrece tal clase de ayuda. Entonces, dependiendo de los fondos disponibles, se puede hacer. Y si no, realmente nuestra presencia después depende de los proyectos que tengamos en nuestras organizaciones y poder convencer a los donantes de por qué es importante que nuestra voz esté en estos procesos internacionales y poder incluir una parte que pueda ser destinada a viajes que nos permitan estar aquí, ¿no? Pero bueno, hay que estar atenta a esas oportunidades para poder sacar provecho desde ya que lejos está de toda la movilización de recursos que se necesita para acompañar el trabajo de sociedad civil. Gracias.
And if I can complement what Anna was saying, which has been amazing clearing some of the questions, particularly on financing and also participation and engagement with the different stakeholders. And I saw that there are some questions also specifically on for the youth caucus. So I'm sharing there the contact details for the youth caucus, which is also a group of young people that they are trying to bring the elements from the youth and try to coordinate also even with the different peers in other conventions, just to make a common front in the international arena with the multilateral environmental agreements. Similar happens with the gender caucus, and I think within the webinars we'll be also discussing, and there is a way that you can be part of this process. Anna, for instance, has been participating in the meetings of the caucus and try to bring also those elements that are relevant. We were announcing, and I think it was Marioldi who said that in decision 5 of the COP16, there is also the request to start working on the establishment of 2 caucuses, one for indigenous peoples and one for local communities. And we are working on this process. And if you are interested because you are identified as indigenous people's organization, or you are considered a local community, if you can be part of this process for defining what will be the engagement that you can have in the COP, also that will be possible. So we will give also when you have my contact details, I can put them also in the chat in case you need any additional information from my side. Of course, the financial resources are limited; they are getting more scarce, but there are opportunities, particularly because when we are talking about this convention, we are talking about what is going on at the national level. So now, for instance, the parties, they will need to prepare the national reports on what they have been doing in the last few years. There will be some consultations where civil society also will need perhaps to participate. So we hope that those of you that are engaged at the national level can contribute there. Of course, participation at the international level depends on the financial resources. And as Anna mentioned, this convention, we are doing something that nobody else is doing. And it's very strange because we don't have that many participants as others. So we try to provide financial support or try to match, see where are the financial resources, while other secretariats, they don't do that, and they have even more participation from civil society. So it's a question also of priority for yourselves, thinking that you want to make efforts and make a difference in the work of the protection and rehabilitation of the land, or other priorities that you may have. So if you decide to work with this convention, there are many opportunities that we can put in front of you. Thank you.
Noel, may I add also something?
Yes, please do, Marioldi. We're running
Thank
short on
you.
time, but we'd love
Yes,
to hear your
very,
voice.
very shortly, and I will switch to Spanish. Sí, acerca de, veo en el chat un comentario sobre cómo dinamizar la representación del CSO panel a nivel de país. Entonces yo solo quería volver a hacer un llamado a todos aquellos interesados en que puedan contactar directamente con su representante regional, ¿no? Como ya mencionó Ana. En el caso de Latinoamérica, por ejemplo, sí hemos tenido algunas experiencias de poder coordinar a través de la representación regional algunas acciones coordinadas a nivel de país. Entonces, creo que el camino sería articulando con sus representantes regionales y para poder organizar alguna acción de nivel nacional que pueda escalar luego y podamos llevarla. Por ejemplo, ahora tenemos la CRIC en Panamá. Podría ser una interesante oportunidad para compartir. Eso es todo. That's it. Thank you, Noel.
Thanks so much, Marioli. I would now like to summarize just a few key takeaways from today. I think, as Marcos pointed out, we all rely on land to sustain society. And let's keep in mind, this convention is unique because it recognizes the contribution of civil society in its text. And in that context, organization is crucial. So contributing to caucuses, contributing to drafting civil society statements at COPs is the way in which we can get our voice across, because individual voices will not be heard by the parties. Let's also keep in mind the convention is primarily implemented at a national level. And of course, funding is necessary. And in this context, I'd like to just alert you to the fact that as part of the project we're implementing, together with IUCN, we'll be publishing a guide on how to access funding for LDN. So that'll provide you with some good pointers. And lastly, just keep in mind, we have some excellent representatives on the panel, on the SPI and on the IWGs. So please connect with them and make sure that your perspectives are heard and can contribute to the debates. We would like to keep in mind that the recording and the slides of today's webinar will be shared with you via email and will also be available soon on the Drynet website. We invite you to stay engaged, to fill out the feedback form, and to join the next webinar on LDN next week, the 30th of October, followed by the webinar on the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure, which will be on the 6th of November. And then finally, the webinar on monitoring community-based sustainable land management and restoration will be happening on the 13th of November. I'd like to draw your attention also to the announcement this week of the Drynet mentorship program. Applications can be submitted until the end of October, and we already have received quite a number in the last couple of days. And with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for your participation and engagement, the wonderful questions, and wish you a good rest of the day today or the evening. And thank you, and go well, and see you soon again online.